was first gen, hungry, determined.
Yeah, the founders.
Second gen, sometimes kind of more tending to the farm. Third gen, we're looking for people that want to blaze some new ground. One of my best clients, a real estate family out in Arizona, he said, my grandfather left my father X, left him this,
Yes.
and my father grew it by this, but I'm determined to grow it by this.
Yes.
And I was like, that's so cool.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. I'll tell you, pre-show, and to certainly my team, I'm pretty excited to have you in here. Though we've never met in person officially, you might be the only guest that I've had on so far in the year and a half of doing the show that I never had a handshake with before coming on. So
wow,
Pete,
I hope it turns out okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I hope you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're the first podcast that I got on a plane. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and you said, I'd love to have you on the podcast, but it's got to be in Cleveland. And I looked at the weather, and I thought, well, I don't know if I should go to Cleveland, but it's good to be here. I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming all the way in from Phoenix. We got a lot of things in common. One, I have a couple of Phoenix, Arizona questions for you. I'm a big Arizona fan.
Yeah.
But more formally maybe known as Coach Pete. I like that. I like that you go by that. He's a two-time author. I want to get into one of his books here with us today, the Family Business Playbook, so we'll get into that. But he's a family business expert, a business coach, and one of the most interesting things for me that we'll dive into in the show here is your journey. Yeah. So not only does he help folks, frankly, like me, run better companies and have better family companies, but he was a part of an 89-year-old family company that eventually sold to Target, which is obviously a brand that we all know and likely use. So before we dive into the business side, have you ever? So I'm a big Phoenix, Arizona fan. We've launched a chapter there. We have a bunch of good stuff going on.
You have a couple of your summits there.
We've had a couple of our summits there in the past. Me and really the EPI team love Scottsdale, Phoenix, really that whole area. Have you ever been to a bar called the Rusty Spur in like Old Town Scottsdale? Do you know about this place?
Oh no, you're killing me, because a bunch of my buddies, that's their favorite bar.
It is.
So I'm going to have to send them to this podcast because they love the Rusty Spur.
Rusty Spur is
of course.
I never know if it's like a local place or not, right? I always say it's probably like a split crowd, right?
No, it's a local place, and my buddy's going to die when I tell him the first question. I go all the way to Cleveland, and the guy asks me, "What do you know about this bar?" And it's like, it's a classic. It's a good bar.
Absolute classic. When we had our summit there, it was a big. I think we spent almost every night there. So we fly in for like a week. Our summit's only 3 days. We got 3 days of prep, 3 days of summit, and then a day of detox after hosting the big event. And me, Paige, Jocelyn, and a lot of the crew here at EPI would find our way over there for the live bands at night. And in fact, I think me and John, who's on our account management team, had a burger and a beer there at noon. Who knew?
Right.
When you're there at night, the tables are gone. You go there in the afternoon, you hear the music playing, you're like, oh, this is a whole different spot. But nonetheless, Rusty Spur.
Okay, that's your first Phoenix question. Okay, good.
That's my first and only really Phoenix question. I just wanted to know. I was like, I wonder if this guy's been to the Rusty Spur.
My family's been in Arizona for over 100 years, actually. So,
So you watched that kind of Old Town area really kind of grow up and evolve.
I grew up 10 minutes from there.
Yeah. So we do a lot of stuff out in that area, and it's always kind of not to totally go off on a tangent, but it first played a big place for me when I was like in grade school. My mom and dad took me to the old Camelback. It's now the JW Camelback, but the old Camelback Shores Marriott. And my grandma Kozlowski, who passed away just about a year ago, very close to me and our whole family. I don't know why I did this, Pete, or maybe you can understand being a 12-year-old boy. My dad got one of those rooms that has a private little pool in the back.
Yeah.
And once I thought Grandma, my Uncle Dave, my mom, and my dad and my sister had all gone to bed, I decided to skinny dip in there. Because I just thought, this is my first pool.
I don't really like where this is headed right now. I'm a little uncomfortable, but go ahead.
Grandma peeked out through the curtain and was like, what is our grandson doing out there? So she actually caught me. So that was my first memory. Then it played a big role in my business life, Scottsdale, because in 2017 we actually were supposed to have our conference down in Bonita Springs, Florida.
Okay.
And you remember Hurricane Irma and Maria ripped through Florida and on much of the Caribbean islands. And our hotel was like, you couldn't use the hotel. So and it's a big moment for our EPI team, truly showed our first kind of sign of grit. We saw our second sign of grit during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But we knew we were a gritty team because we had a decision, right? Do we cancel the whole summit? We had like 300 people coming. Or do we move it as far away from the path as we can? So in literally 1 week, we picked up a 300-person conference, moved it to the Fairmont Princess in Scottsdale.
Beautiful.
Who just had happened to have extra space.
Yeah.
And we had 75% of our attendees come with us.
Wow.
That was great, right? We had 100% of our speakers and 100% of our sponsors.
It says a lot for your organization.
Thank you.
It?
Yeah, I do.
That's great.
Yeah, I thought it was so Scottsdale played home to that because that would have been a total cluster.
Yeah.
We would have had to do refunds and all kinds of stuff. It would have been just killed momentum. So, anyways, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Come to Arizona anytime. You're welcome anytime. And be careful at the Rusty Spur. If my buddies are in there,
it is a
kinda,
warning. I will say for
knuckleheads.
any of our listeners, if you haven't been and want to go, just watch yourselves because it does.
No,
or if you're
it's fun.
claustrophobic, definitely don't go in there because it's about the size
That's
of our
the reason I don't go, quite honestly. My buddies go, but I don't anymore.
So the other memory lane that I'll take you down in prepping for our show, and if you get Coach Pete's book, in the very back, right in the very back, which I thought as a family business owner and maybe a student of family business, I saw all these cool pictures that you had of your family business story, and I was telling you pre-show, one of the coolest pictures, if you're tuning in on video, you could see over here is the picture of the business and all of their trucks. And I was like a landscaper, so having big boy toys was cool, right? Trucks, excavators. So it took me down memory lane. So I was upstairs this morning prepping, and I don't even know when this was, but several years ago, Walker is a lawnmower, a commercial lawnmower, and a specialized commercial lawnmower, and we did like high image oriented properties, right? So we wanted the best equipment.
Yeah.
So we used a lot of Walker mowers, and given we were a young family business, Walker, who was celebrating their family reunion of another family business, right? Another decades old family business, was featured us, and they couldn't. I remember because typically you'd be featured on the cover, but given it was their family reunion edition, they would give me the inside. So like I wanted to show you this because I thought as a man that has pictures of his family legacy kind of in the book here, his family business. This was like me when I was like 20 years old, and this was like our crew. That was like our office manager. That's actually not to even go down a whole nother family business run too. This is my ex-wife. So my ex-wife was a part of our business. This is our general manager. And it just got me down the rabbit hole. As you flip to the other side, you can see us riding the mowers, by the trucks and all that kind of stuff. And like this popped out of there too. It's like my first office.
Oh, I did see that.
And this is me and Mikey, so the M and M&S connection, like in the Strongsville Home Days parade. So not as cool as I think your pictures, but if you've seen some of my dad's presentation, I'll have to pull it too. My dad starts a lot of his presentations with the Snider family band, which was like the farming, like E.J. Snider and his group, like strumming on like acoustic guitars and banjos back in the farm days. But, I just thought.
I remember this picture because it's really a unique office furniture setup.
Yeah, we got to go down.
It jumped out at me.
Crafty, intelligent, I thought, right? Like good use of
innovative,
equipment.
very innovative
for sure.
My favorite picture in that book, you passed it a minute ago, was a handwritten note from my grandfather to my father and uncle, and it said, "Must stick to business more than ordinary employees." And that picture is still up on my wall. I just think it's a great story about family business, and just was listening to a different podcast last week, and the guy was talking about, hey, as a family member, you've got to walk the talk, and it's a critical piece of family business.
Same thing that my dad used to always say to me so Dad was a good mentor inside of M&S, and he's my bank as well, because when I first started, I couldn't get any loans, so Dad would fund it as a bank. Yeah. But when we came really into business at EPI, I was always like, dude, why the hell are you so hard on me?
Yeah.
And he said, it's like, you're more than just the average employee. And so you got to work harder. You got to represent our family and our business. So, so anyways, let's dive into it, I guess. Great segue into, I want to start with kind of the way backstory, because I think it's your journey on what you're doing today. So you had a nearly 100-year-old business. I mean, that's pretty incredible. 89-year-old business. So you began though in typewriters, right?
We did.
And then transitioned or evolved into steel case furniture,
Office
which
furniture, yeah.
when you walked in, and if any of our listeners have been to the EPI headquarters, we have steel case stuff, at least in parts. So it's like down memory lane. So talk to me about the founding of the family business, 100 plus years ago.
Well, my great uncle, Peter Walsh, my namesake, moved to Arizona for health reasons, for tuberculosis. That's what they would do way back in the day. Went out there, started a Royal Typewriter Agency. My grandfather then joined shortly thereafter in the 1920s. And the other thing I said to you, which is such an interesting part of the family business story, is I have the letters from my grandfather to his brother in the late 1920s, because we were a typewriter shop. Of course, he's typing the letter to his brother that says, dude, you need to come to work on time. You need to get your shirts pressed, and you need to have a better attitude around here, or we need to get rid of you. And then he pruned the family tree. And I just think that's such an interesting story. So then my grandfather bought the business from his brothers.
So they actually bought it from the brothers.
He did. Okay. Well, actually, the founding brother passed away. Okay. Then we have the letters from the trustee of the estate kind of turning the screws to my grandfather. And my grandfather turns the screws back and says, I'm the guy running the business. So if you want to come out from Pennsylvania and run the business with this dude, you can. I'm out of here. And we ended up buying the business. Our family did. Okay. So one of the things in family business that I work with sometimes is to say, like, hey, maybe you're not meant to stay together forever. You know, sometimes it's what we call pruning the family tree, which you'll like from your background. You got to keep a tree healthy by getting rid of a dead branch or two.
Absolutely right.
So then for many years, a typewriter dealership, got into office furniture. Back in the day, we used to sell 100 gray desks to, these big companies. So it was a lot easier then, right? By the time I got there, we were doing cubicles for, Fortune 100 companies, a lot more moving parts. We had 300 employees. It was my life's dream to run our family business. I went to a business school, got a degree, went and started working in sales, project management, operations management. By the time I was in my mid-30s, I was beginning to realize Uncle Tim, who I loved dearly and respected, he was just super conservative, super frugal. I told you that he prided himself on the modest income he was making out of the business. And by the time I was in my mid-30s, I'd lost 2 brothers and 2 best friends, and I decided life was short. And he had said, this is going to be yours someday. And I thought, he was also a workaholic. So now I'm in my mid-30s, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to spend another 20 years here really following his values, not my values. We had some values that overlapped nicely, but some that didn't overlap. And I really felt I had an obligation to my wife and kids to make the most of my earning years. And we were at church, Karen and I, with the kids. And I like to say I'm highly spiritual, although not highly religious or recovering Catholic.
A recovering, me too. Me too. Maybe a whole other podcast.
Yeah, right,
I
exactly.
went kindergarten through my first year of college, all private.
Did you
Catholic
go to an
schools.
all-boys high school?
Absolutely.
I did too.
I went to a Jesuits, or I went to I went to a Brothers of the Holy Cross school.
Yeah, there you
then
go.
I switched over to the Jesuits in college, and I made it that year. But
I went to Jesuit high school.
Got married in the church in my first marriage, Catholic ceremony. But then when I got divorced, I kind of wandered. And so I don't know how I would describe myself in the moment right now with you. But I would say certainly a recovering Catholic, for sure.
So the sermon was about finding your special gift. And I prayed in that moment and said, help me find what mine is, because I know I can hit a home run for you. My exact words. 3 days later, a friend of mine who owned a construction company said, our coach said this. I said, your coach? What's that? And she said, somebody helps us develop our plans and hold us accountable. And I said, you're kidding. That's a job? Oh, my God. I went home and told Karen, I know what I'm supposed to do. I mean, my life turned on a dime then. I was a coaching leader. I was bringing our crews together, rehearsing, talking about how we could improve customer service, efficiency. This was before anybody ever heard of a business coach or an executive coach.
What was your role during that time in the business? Like an operations guy?
I was the vice president of operations. So I was responsible for a couple hundred of the employees. employees, and we
Yeah,
had
can imagine.
locations around the state. We had a lot of warehouse delivery, installation people. We had 7 different divisions of our company, sold a lot of different products by then. And so I came home and told Karen, I know what I'm supposed to do. I hired a coach. Now, that's the other funny story. I went to Uncle Tim and I said, I'd like to hire a coach. Now, Uncle Tim never spent money on anything like that. And he looked at me and said, good idea. And I was like, okay. And I got a coach.
It is meant to be.
Yeah, and loved what we did. Started coaching nighttime, weekends, part-time, and just loved it, and eventually resigned from the family business. And so I was out coaching in corporate America in leadership development, really loving it. And an estate planning attorney came to me and said, you should work with family businesses, given your background. And I said, no, I don't think so. That's kind of messy. But I'd been away long enough that I could bring kind of the professionalizing of the firm, kind of like what your dad did. You went and learned a lot of stuff in corporate America, came back into the families and just loved it. And so I say to people sometimes, I thought my life's dream was to run my family business, but God's dream was for me to impact family businesses all over the world. So I built a website, Family Business Performance Center.
Yep.
And I literally get families from like the Middle East, from all over the country. They come to me. And so it's really, I feel like a sacred mission I'm on.
Yeah.
I also work in non-family businesses as well. I love being a coaching leader, and that's what I want to talk about. That was kind of the pitch I made to you, because when you said earlier, like when a coach is tough on you, you kind of respect that and embrace it. Now, when a manager is tough on you, you're kind of like, what a jerk, what a, you know what, or he's micromanaging me. So when you can become a coaching leader, you build a bond with your people that builds loyalty and has a competitive spirit and works on resilience. And the other thing I saw on one of your podcasts is you said one of the things you're most proud of is you're using your methodology to live your life.
Exactly.
So I have a coaching relationship with my wife and with my 30-year-old kids, and we'll all joke and say like, hey, you open to a little coaching for a minute, but we're always trying to listen, help each other, challenge each other. And I think in today's world, we need to learn how to be resilient. And business is a competitive sport, so you've got to keep learning how to build a strong, loyal team.
Yeah, so we're certainly gonna dive into all of that. Before we do, though, I think one of the other interesting things, at least for the audience, right, a bunch of people that are helping people grow and buy, grow, sell different companies. Now, you weren't around in 2007 when the family business sold to Target, but were you kind of privy to what was going on in that time for them? Like, was it tough for them? What was that? Because you had to be a pretty big company with 300 people, but selling to a huge corporation like Target had to be different, I guess.
Definitely. And one of the things that I say to you is that one of the lessons that I want to bring to people is you don't get to pick your time. So my uncle, it was, again, really a blessing. First of all, when you want to say goodbye to the family business, it's like chloroforming your favorite uncle. I mean, it was this.
Was it tough for you to leave? What did he
he
say to you? Were you like, do you remember the moment where you sat down in his
Well, I was a
office or
stockholder. My grandfather, and this is what happens in a lot of families, he left most of it to his kids and then a bunch of it to his grandchildren. So we were all stockholders.
Were they all working in the business?
No.
Okay.
Just a couple of us. That was one of the. And the extended stockholders weren't really in the loop about what was happening. You kind of keep that quiet. But my uncle had, and I told you this, and that was the other beautiful thing for me, was he finally hired and got a president. But was terribly unhappy with the way he was doing things. And I was like, oh, my God, that could have been me. And I would have had all that family
drama
garbage
stuff that
in my head about he wouldn't have liked anybody running it because it was his baby, kind of. And so when he decided to sell, well, then when we sold, that was a long process. When we sold, we cashed the check, and 30 days later, the Great Recession hit. So what I say to business owners a lot is, you don't always get to pick your spot. So here you are in your mid-60s thinking, well, this is pretty good, and someday I'm going to sell it. And I try to say to them, hey, you might want to be thinking about that, because I told you I had a client whose the aha moment was when folks, the people that you train and develop, said to them, hey, what's going to happen if something happens to you? And you picture your wife sitting across the table with these people trying to, what do you think is going to happen to the value of your business and your bargaining position? So for us, that was a really tough time to say goodbye to Walsh Brothers. But it was also the best thing for the family, for the employees. Most of the family members, I was the youngest in the third generation. They were in their late 50s, early 60s. That was a liquidity event that was really helpful for the family. Now, if you look back, what am I going to do? Am I going to go get a massive loan from the bank or investors to take out my family? You know, if I look back, I love what I do. I feel super blessed to do it. So for some families, you know, you should sell your business, but you should think about when you sell your business, because, and you know, that was in one of your podcasts recently as well. Be proactive, you know. And my buddy said it was like fixing up your house. You think you're going to sell your house, and you think it's worth so much, and everybody's going to love it. Well, that's not always the case. Start a few years early, getting the maintenance done, trimming it up, getting a fresh paint job, making it impeccable inside and out, getting it ready for sale. So business owners need to really understand that. But it was a really tough, emotional time. I could imagine. And a celebration. I mean, 89 years is a pretty good run. That's a long
run, man. That is an absolute, and to your point, the evolution from typewriters to furniture to expansion to 300 employees, like I could tell you in our business today, you probably met Josh when you came to the office. Josh is our longest employee, but Josh and I also have a deep personal relationship. I was the best man in his wedding. And watching this business, our business, grow today, when it was like me, Josh, and like 2 or 3 other people in a small office, and now there's 30 plus, almost 36 people running around EPI these days. Like, I could not even imagine going from like the 2 brothers to 300 people like that. It had to be a wild
Well, let me ask you this. Is it getting any easier just in general to run a company? You know, everybody, I joke with the business owners too. Everybody wants a piece of you, your employees, your manufacturers, the federal government. So it's just not getting any easier. So, and you
definitely
had your
more complex.
You had your 2 buddies on. And I'm thinking, you know, the hope that one of those kids wants to run a big machine shop. I don't know. My son's a filmmaker in Hollywood. My daughter does stand-up comedy and lives a beautiful life. I mean, if you said to either of them, hey, you want to come run a 300 employee office furniture company, they'd like rather, you know, do anything else. So it's, you know, but a lot of families really think this is going to go on forever. And for some of them, it does. Some of them make sense. But your job and mine is to help them be more thoughtful and go through a process to figure that out, 100%. Not to just have an emotional, you know, hope.
Hope and journey. So I want to get into some of your playbook and some of the methodology and concepts that you teach. We're going to do that after a quick break. So stick with us. We'll be back just in a couple of minutes.
Are you a business owner seeking to unlock the true potential of your enterprise? Look no further than the 2nd edition of Christopher Snider's revolutionary book, Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. In this updated edition, Snider presents proven strategies for maximizing your company's value and accelerating growth. Whether you're aiming to sell or simply want to ensure long-term success, this book offers a blueprint for building a thriving, self-sustaining business. Walking to Destiny isn't just another book, it's a game changer, backed by Snider's own experience as a successful business owner and as a CPA. This book bridges the gap between business owners and advisors, guiding you towards financial freedom. But don't just take our word for it. Hear from those whose lives have been transformed by its insights. One satisfied reader raves, "The best guide for transitioning out of privately owned companies. I recommend it to all business owners and advisors." Another praises it on its focus for maximizing business value, calling it their, quote, principal tool for educating owners. Ready to take control of your business's destiny? Visit walkingtodestiny.com now and use code EXITISNOW to claim your free copy of Walking to Destiny. 11 actions an owner must take to rapidly grow value and unlock wealth. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the moment perfect by seizing this opportunity today.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So now I want to dive in with you, Pete, on all the stuff that you teach guys like me, family business owners, and really business owners of all kind. There are a few things that when we met each other and we started jiving a little bit that stuck out to me. One, a coaching culture. Two, deliberate practice. And three, I want to talk about this stress and anxiety that you mentioned as well that we see in America today that's affecting our employees, our team. So that kind of, for me, I don't know if this is starting at the top for you, but for me, the first thing that comes up is you talk a lot about having a coaching culture. You call yourself Coach Pete.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the first segment of the show, too, how we as business teams and owners, too, it's kind of like running a basketball team. Yeah. Right? Like we have coaches, right, that help us along and guide us along. So talk to me about what a coaching culture means.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back just a step.
Sure.
When I started writing my first book, Coach to Win the Leadership Game, I came across this guy, K. Anders Ericsson at Florida State University, and he studied the top performers in a broad range of fields, sports, performing arts, medicine, and he found that the people that were the very best practiced a certain way. It wasn't about talent. Really interesting. Yeah. So they practiced in a way called deliberate practice. He coined the term. And so deliberate practice is set out to stretch you out of your comfort zone. It has a specificity to it. It has a repetition aspect to it. You know, you look at a Tiger Woods, he goes out, he grabs the 7-iron, does the same thing the same way. In your podcast I was watching last night, you and Dad have your meeting once a month where you go through. That is a form of deliberate practice. So that proved that deliberate practice is really important. Okay, we know that. And there was a guy, basketball player in our town, Steve Nash. He would, I hate to say, but I can't help. I'm not always politically correct, but a short white guy.
Yeah,
and he would go out before every game and shoot around like 100 balls, deliberate practice. And so when you watch the guy play, you think like, oh, wow, super talented, but he practiced a certain way. So deliberate practice is really important. Coaching culture is creating a partnership, creating a vibe in your office. And you've got a great vibe here where people want to win. I think that's important. You know, business is a competitive sport. When you're in some family businesses, for sure, and even mature businesses, you can kind of rest on your laurels a little bit. So the coaching culture creates this competitiveness. And then what I think is really important, I talked to you about this, is resilience, because we've been through a lot. I am an embedded coach in some companies, and what that means is I'm the coach for like all the employees, and they come to me and they're just like, oh my God, I got so much going on and I'm stressed out and I'm having a hard time, getting up and coming to work sometimes, and I work with the leadership teams as well. But when you play for a great coach says, hey, have your John Wooden, he taught, oh my gosh, it'll come back to me in the guy he played with for a long time. First thing he taught him was Bill Walton. He went in for the first meeting, and the guy showed him how to tie his shoes, to lace his shoes up. And Bill Walton was like, who is this dude? I mean, what a quack. But a coach creates a relationship that helps you work on the fundamentals and bring your best self every day. So that's what a coaching culture is. And we know what a business coach is. We know an executive coach is. There's a lot of those now. When I started 20 years ago, nobody had heard of coaching. But I teach people how to be coaching leaders. And a coaching leader, and there's a sign up, by the way, 20 yards from us here that says a leader, a coaching leader who's somebody alongside of you, not an overseer, not somebody who's up in the ivory tower, and you're kind of a coaching leader, that we're on the field together, playing, learning how to win, bringing our best. And I said, it's a backdrop of that book, that I have a 50-year relationship with my Little League coach, Bill Shover. He took me under his wing, not terribly talented guy, me, and he helped me build some confidence, and he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. That's another really cool coaching move, is you can push people, you can challenge them, and really help them bring the best version of themselves. So that's really what a coaching culture is about. And I think it's one of the most effective cultures needed in today's workforce, because people are stressed out. Even after the pandemic, they're thinking twice about who they go work for. You know, you had your couple buddies on your show. At our company, we had a guy that had been with us 60 years. Put your mind around that. It was my grandfather's peer that was still there when I got there.
Loyal, man. Wow.
But nowadays, most people are reluctant to stay around.
They move.
And
they move.
and we know how important it is when they learn your business, they learn how to do things well. So I think it's a coaching culture is a great recipe for leadership. And a lot of leaders, Scott, they think of leadership like this one thing. I think of leadership as being a leader, big picture vision. Manager, stuff's got to get done. The manager's like, hey, did this get done? A mentor, you could be a mentor for somebody in the landscaping business. You'd say, hey, here's how you might want to approach this project, right? Because that's specific knowledge. And a coach is about developing talent. A coach, in my work, it's this idea of reviewing the game film. So we come back together every week, and we say, hey, last week we said that when we run this play, you're going to be right there. And then when the game was on, you weren't there. What happened? And, I forgot. So this idea of kind of thinking about how we're going to perform, going out and performing, then coming back and reviewing the game film and doing that over and over again.
And then very deliberately and very intentional.
Exactly.
So go back, though. I think, when I think about perhaps your work, and I think that listening to you describe that, I'd like to think we're like that in a sense, right?
I can feel it
you
already
can feel
when
it?
you're
Okay,
around
good.
here.
You talked about people wanting to win, and I think that almost everybody that we hire here, if not everybody, has a sense of competitiveness. If you looked around the office and met all 30-something of us, we might not all be athletes, but we're all competitors. We're either trying to be the best at a sport, or trying to be the best at a hobby, or trying to be the best at a musical instrument. I think everybody has a form of competitiveness within them. But I'm thinking, and maybe just as this is how we kind of grew our company, right? We're all kind of very entrepreneurial mindset folks. Yeah. I couldn't imagine. I think it would be a great challenge for you to go into a company that doesn't have that, right? That winning culture. So if you're trying to go into this coaching culture, deliberate practice. You talked about Steve Nash. When you get in there, is there a lot of like turnover? Because you go into the owner and say, look, I mean, these people just don't have that mindset.
Well, it's funny.
Or can it be coached?
I think about that in the family businesses. It's kind of like I'm kind of sorting them out, because the best ones have, now this is the other thing that happens in family business, first gen, hungry, determined,
the founders.
Second gen, sometimes kind of more tending to the farm. They're kind of like, don't want to screw up what grandpa started. Third gen, we're looking for people that want to blaze some new ground. That was the last question you ask your buddies. You're like, okay, what are you going to accomplish? One of my best clients, a real estate family out in Arizona, he said, my grandfather left my father X, left him this, and my father grew it by this, but I'm determined to grow it by this. And I was like, that's so cool, because sometimes in a family business, the second or third gen's kind of like, let me just not screw this up. So every organization's different. There's an old saying in my line of work, the organization follows the leader. This place has your personality. So in the family business, and that's the other thing I say sometimes, is we're hoping somebody in that next generation is a wealth creator. because we got to blaze some new ground. We usually, I haven't come across many family businesses, and I work with them all across the country, where it's just like they got this product that's just like selling like hotcakes. It's easy. There's no competition. You got to keep evolving. So with some families, and that's why 7 out of 10 family businesses fail, to reach the next generation.
Exactly.
So we're looking for the ones, I'm looking for leaders who get this competitive spirit, who want to create a different culture, who want to, because that's the thing you said too. You can't motivate all these people. You just can't do it. You want to create a framework, a foundation in which they can bring their own personal energy every day.
Exactly.
And that's what a coaching culture creates.
Well, I think that's one of the other big things that we're working on now too. So if you were talking about how you've been following the podcast a little bit, really last year's journey, what we've seen post-COVID in our own business is really a big decentralization of my dad, Chris, right?
Yeah.
It allowed him to really focus on some much-needed personal planning, much-needed estate planning, and things of that nature. And allowed me and the team to really step up for the business.
Yeah.
And now, over the course of 2013 and then through 2024, the focus is actually decentralizing me. My biggest worry is for our leadership team. There's 5 of us in addition to me, but 5 of us without me, and then maybe another 3 or 4 next level managers, right? And how do they keep that culture that's been created over the last five or so years? I mean, we've been in business since 10. If you follow the podcast, and for our listeners, big pivot in 2020 that reshaped who we were.
Yeah.
So over the last, say, I guess 3 to 4 years, how do they take that culture, add their own personality to it, but continue to evolve and grow? And I think that's actually really, at least for an owner, it's a really hard thing for me to let go of, because I'm so passionate about what we've built already. And I think, and nowadays, it's funny, as we start to hire people, I'm more and more removed. Like the other day, the people went out, we had new employees start, Pete, and at my office overlooks the parking lot. And I started this thing when we would hire people, and whether it was just the 3 of us, or then it grew to 5 of us, and it grew to 10 to 12, that we would always take the new person out to lunch on their very first day. And just get a little loose, right? Like, I want to know you as a person, right? Like not the formal training that we've been doing all morning. And so that is one cool thing from a culture standpoint that our leaders have now put into their teams. So Paige, our director of marketing, Jocelyn, our operations manager, took out their teams, and they didn't invite me. So I watched them walk out the office, and I'm like looking through my blinds, like, what the hell? And it was a weird thing for me. It was a really weird thing, but also almost like a fatherly moment to see my next gen leaders saying, like, we got this, and we're going to keep that tradition and bring them into the culture. So I think culture, evolution of culture, but kind of keeping the core values of it and core sense of it, I think it's kind of a nerve-wracking thing as an owner.
Yeah. You better go get a box of tissue, because I think you're going to get teared up. No, I'm talking about it. But and I say to my clients, when I get you to cry, that's an upcharge. With these families, we get them like
I get
teared
more
up
emotional
and
as
talking.
I hit 40 years old. I'll tell you what, man.
But it's just like your kids. You want your kids someday to be able to do their thing. What we're talking about in the coaching culture is building in the foundations of it, being competitive, being the best we can be, deliberate practice. Them putting their unique spin on it is a good thing, really. So if you have the right framework in place, if you have the values, right? The values will guide that. And so it's the natural course of things. And with some companies I've worked with that were 10, they're 40, they're 75 employees. And typically when they get to 75, they're like, oh, I wish we were still 15. It felt so cool and different when we were 15. Different. Yet, if you're trying to accomplish something, you've got to get bigger to have a bigger reach, like the work that you're doing. So it's a trade-off, but they're doing okay.
Yeah, no, I think to your point, for me, when I look at our own business, I feel the same way sometimes. When I sit back in my chair, sometimes I'm like, man, like we just had to redo like our company handbook, you know, and all this formalities that, frankly, when it was just four or five of us, we didn't even have.
Yeah, right.
So, but I sit back sometimes. And I go, man, you do sometimes in the moment wish that maybe it was simpler. But at the same time, that we're on a mission, right? Like we are truly on a purposeful mission to help business owners think differently about the way they run it. And for me, as a younger owner, I grew up thinking that you grew a business profitable, efficient, and a purposeful product. I did not think until I obviously got really involved with my dad, long-term value.
Yeah.
And so just really changing the owner's mindset. So you do have those moments where you're like, okay, well, we have to get bigger to have more influence to affect more lives. But the other thing that came to mind when you were talking about the generation, so you said potentially that third generation is one that looks to evolve the business, right? So first generation founder, second generation, let's maintain and maybe slowly grow. Third generation, let's evolve maybe with new products and processes. If the first generation, in your experience, is still involved, how reluctant are they to see those third generations people go, whoa, 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 whoa? Like we're getting away from core product.
Well, you had your buddy sitting right in this chair,
Yep.
and he said, my dad is a bit more interested in spending money. My uncle's a bit more frugal.
Right.
And you could see the wheels turning in his head. And then he said, actually, what he said was, and my cousin's a lot like his dad, and I'm a lot like my dad.
Oh, boy.
So it gets more complicated as you go on. And part of the thing that I try to help families say is like, look, we have a platform here. Think of this as like an oil rig or something. We got this platform. Let's create it in a way that you can express a little bit of your values of creativity and maybe expansion. And maybe this side of the business is going to be a bit more conservative. If we don't find ways to create those opportunities for each other, somebody's going to be dissatisfied. Somebody's going to be upset. Look, it's not about everybody always being happy either, but as the family evolves, we've really got to look at all of that. And that first gen, and I said this to you before the break, that I have a couple of young men and women that are prisoners in their own business. And Dad is a great guy, smart guy, and I want to say to Dad, please, 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 because that's the other thing. Your legacy, your dad's legacy is you, by the way, dude. You're doing a great job, and your dad's done a good job. You know, if this place, as it grows and flourishes and soars, that's awesome. That's called level 5 leadership. That's not a leader that's like getting his identity and ego met by seeing everybody come into his office and ask him questions. So I try to get in the leader's mind. I have a lot of people say to me, and the Coach Pete thing, by the way, came from my clients. They started calling me Coach Pete, and then I just kind of ran with that. But I'll have people say,
this is Coach Pete, man. I get it.
I'll have people say, you said that thing to me 10 years ago, and that's still in my brain when I approach X. And so I'm trying to get in people's minds to say, like, if you want to if the company could speak, what would it say that it needs? And what it's saying it needs right now, Dad, is for you to get the hell out of the way and let us go on to our future. So it's an issue, but great leaders are selfless leaders, and they understand for the good of the business, I need to hand this over to my son or daughter. Yeah. And if I just let them die on the vine, if I keep telling them, and that was the other thing you brought up and was brought up with your buddies, they got to make a mistake or two. I made some costly mistakes, and Uncle Tim was nice enough to let me do that. Yeah. Yet that's how I learned. So
100%. That is another thing when in our world of exit planning and this decentralization and letting go. I think that's hard to do, even in my own father's eyes, right? So Dad's got a lot invested, right? Like this is. He rolled everything he had. When we said, okay, Dad, I had sold my company. I was hanging out with him for a year in his consulting practice. I said, Dad, let's buy EPI.
Yeah.
He goes, all right. So he rolled the dice, but he rolled the dice with about everything he's had. Yeah. And I remember when it wasn't going as planned in the first year and a half, he asked me, he's like, look, we're in this thing together. We wrote the growth strategy. I need you to go in and run this thing. And I was always a little intimidated of our business because I actually didn't graduate college, right? So now I'm going to enter a professional education company with folks that have MBAs, law degrees, and things that at the time for me were like way above anything that I could. I was like, I don't know if I could even fit into this crowd. And but then Dad, coming back and letting and having to let go was critical, but it could have lost him a lot of money too. Well, now think about COVID though. Yeah. So COVID, we do 9 programs, 2019, 9 SEPA programs, all in person, 1 summit, all in person. Dad, I can remember the conversations. We kind of talked about it a couple times on the show. Dad thought about shutting it down. Yeah. He goes, dude, like, we have a nice little nest egg now. Like, I know the mission isn't done, but like if this COVID crashes our company, like you have time to recover as a young man.
Right.
I'm not going back into corporate America and working like this. Like I can hunker down.
I can't go back.
I can't
Yeah.
go back. So
Well, here's the
letting
thing.
go is critical.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, Dad's a good judge of talent, because sometimes a good coaching leader says,
Yeah.
hey, this guy didn't go to the Division I school, but he's got a lot of talent. And, dude, you've got a lot of talent and a lot of presence about you. So don't ever for a minute think that you can't run circles around. I've met a lot of people, seriously, that have an MBA that maybe don't have some of the good instincts that you have, the leadership presence that you have. But you bring up a really good point, and we know this from your industry and the work that we do, that we got to help these founders sit down and think that through. Take a little risk off the table. Think about ESOP. Think about other choices so that, the business can go forward.
Yeah.
My wife and I are in our 60s. You know, it's like I could imagine some wives where it's like the guy's like, don't worry, it's going to work out. And it's like, hold on, you've been working there for 30 years. How about if we can sleep at night knowing that it's taken care of? So that happened, but your dad made a good choice, and you have a lot of great leadership presence about you.
And so does our team, really, when you think about it, too, is that now I'm doing that with my team, and Dad's like, I can't believe you just let them roll the dice like that. I was like, Dad, now I'm budgeting for it, though, right? So I'm throwing in like a 10% bump inside of the budget because I know this is going to cost us $50,000, maybe even $100,000 to let somebody like Paige, our director of marketing, roll the dice, learn, and grow. Now, again, Dad, it's going to cost us money, but she's going to be a better leader when we come out of it, if it even happens anyways, right? It might not happen, and we're more profitable than that we thought. But for me, my advice to somebody like Dad or our business leaders is, well, just start budgeting for it. You know it's going to come.
And that's the sophistication, that's the professionalizing of the firm, that you're planning for that. But the other thing is, my grandfather was writing in the 1950s, and I wanted to mention that. I took his letters and I put them in my book, because he was writing to our employees in the 1950s and 60s and saying, you shouldn't go work somewhere else. You don't want to own your own place. You own this place. You're an owner here. Keep helping us run this if it is your place. We became an ESOP later. We had bonus programs in every part of our company. So that's one of the things you're doing. You're creating autonomy for them, that they have the ability to decision making and run it as if they own it. And they'll stay here. I mean, that's easier. That's better than going out and starting. And that was in one of the podcasts as well. Super hard to go from zero to something, to go from something built with a foundation. So I think you're doing the right thing in that regard.
So, correct me if I'm wrong too, what I read is that I think it was your grandfather. He put in like profit sharing and bonus programs, right?
We had it in each part of the company,
and that's early thinking too.
Monthly, and I try to encourage my business owners to think about that too. You know, here's what happens in corporate America: we wait around all year, and then the year-end numbers come in, and then in April I get my bonus, and then after that I resign and go someplace else.
Right.
In our furniture business, we had a bonus monthly on the number of equipment that we delivered. And here's the bonus pool. Here's what goes into it. And by the way, we're going to take out the damaged desks, the 3 desks you damaged that comes right out of the bonus pool, the lost tools.
Right.
So now whatever's left, you're going to get to
much
take
better
an extra,
ownership though.
Yeah, you're going to get to take an extra $100 home. And now your family, because let's not forget their families are important. Their family comes home and says, hey, I got an extra $100 because I worked my tail off last month. Rather than waiting a whole year for that. Now, I know it's complicated. It gets a little trickier to do that, but I think great business leaders build those things into their business so that people have a connection to what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're an owner without having equity, right? So it's like it does give you some stickiness into the company. So I got to take a quick break. So I will be back in just like a minute or so, and I want to talk a little bit about your books, and we'll wrap up. Thanks.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial. And with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge in exit planning education and understanding, yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So we're already at the top of the hour. We're going to have you back for another show to dive a little
I'd
deeper.
love
right?
to do it.
Time flies,
and I'll
right?
even come in the summer when it's super hot
Right.
in Arizona. I mean,
Right.
I came in the
Right.
winter. That's
Don't want to
that
come
speaks
here.
highly.
I mean, it's a little abnormal now, but yeah, in
Yeah.
the winter, we got some heavy snow, so you might
Yeah,
want to stay
yeah,
away from
right.
that. So I want to ask you about your books. When I have authors on the show, I think it's fascinating. I saw my dad now write 2 books, at least 1 book, 2 editions. And so, how was the book writing process for you? I know, and I asked that too, knowing that a lot of our certified exit planning advisors are great thought leaders, and they always contemplate, man, I'd love to put my thoughts into a book, but it just seems like such a wild process. So, what was your process?
Well, I joked with you. I said I know 100 coaches, and 85 of them tell me I got a book,
Right.
and 5 of them actually have a book. It takes some,
Dude,
so
I'm telling you,
it
it's
takes
a lot.
work.
Yeah.
I found a process early on. Keep it simple, avoid perfection. I'm proud of both of my books. One of the things, the Family Business Playbook, is I said to my grandfather, he's up in heaven now, but I wrote and said, dude, we're going to be having an impact on families long after we're gone. So like your father, like inventing the value acceleration methodology,
Very true.
that thing's going to be working. Isn't that what we always want, is to be able to have an impact? So I would just encourage people, hey, do it. It's hard work. You have to set aside the time. Start with a framework.
Yep.
You got a lot of content comes out of you. Just sit down and kind of put it in 10 big buckets. Then you got your 10 chapters. And it's really an important thing. And it allows you to have an impact after you're gone. It forces you to really crystallize your thinking.
Absolutely.
It's a hard process. And it's a great thing to do, and it's really a legacy piece, and I think
that's
legitimacy
really
too.
I mean, I never really thought about it as a legacy piece, but a legacy piece. But you're absolutely right. Is that that's kind of cool that you learn from your grandfather, and you're showcasing those stories from your family business and the work you do in 2024. So there's a legacy, and then to your point, like my dad, I think that's really Dad's ultimate goal, right? Is to make a big impact on the overall market. And so hopefully people are learning about the value acceleration methodology and reading a version of Walking to Destiny 20, 30, 40 years from now. That's a kind of cool piece. Did you go away, though? Like, Dad went to the beach for 3 weeks
I
and
just
just
got
mined.
a copy of his book. I saw the beach house in there.
Yeah.
Yes, I did go
So you
away
went
for
away.
a few times. And it really is a painful process for sure. Yet it's like everything else, right?
Right.
Hard work distinguishes you. The people that, reach that certain level are willing to do the work that other people aren't.
Well, it's the coach
willing
going
to
back
do.
to the coaching culture.
Yeah, and I think the Family Business Playbook, as you saw, is practical. It's not great big theory. It's got lots of proven exercise. It's really designed to be a do-it-yourself manual.
It's really in my reading of it, it is. It's a playbook. In fact, you met Paige. Me and Paige were talking about it for our SEPAs. We have a 120-day playbook. It's really about integrating everything that you learned in the credential. So our biggest pain point, if you will, that we're trying to solve is people love the SEPA week, right? So you go to SEPA, you earn your credential, and you're all jazzed up. Now, we're all different types of advisors. So some of us are family folks like you. Some of us are financial advisors, estate planning attorneys. We're all going to implement what we learn different ways. So anyways, we created this 120-day playbook.
Yeah.
After reading your book, I was like, dude, we should, instead of having a downloaded document, we should put it into a book. So
Well, and
you've
that's
given me
what-
some ideas.
Coaching is about sustainable change in behavior.
100%.
So, yeah.
Well, Pete, I appreciate you coming in, and we'll have to have you back because I have so much
I'd love
more
to do
ask,
it.
all right? So
Maybe when you're out in Scottsdale next time,
we could do a
I'll
show
meet
from
you
your
over at the
place.
Rusty Spur.
we could
I'll-
live.
I
Are you
will
hearing this?
break-
Outside the
I
studio.
will break my
we have Jocelyn.
rule
Yes, and go.
to go to the Rusty
Maybe we'll
Spur.
we could bring the equipment. We'll do an afternoon show so it's not as rowdy.
There you go.
We sit on
At
that
the
little
Rusty
stage
Spur.
when the guy does
like
the
it.
acoustic break. We'll go and do a podcast.
Yeah.
All right, Coach Pete. Well, we'll see you, and everybody subscribe, listen, and leave a review on all of your podcast platforms. Again, Pete, thank you.
Thank you.
Really
Really
appreciate
enjoyed
you
it.
joining us. We'll see you guys next time.